What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we're going to be ending our series of division predictions with the Pacific Division, the final video, the final episode. So if you guys have tuned in and watched the Metro, the Atlantic, and obviously the Central Division videos, you guys are welcome to the final part. If you guys haven't, please go check those out as well. They're great videos, and if you guys like watching your teams or you like us talking about your teams, it's the best way to go and look at it. So we're gonna start off just right away. We're gonna get straight into it with the Anaheim Ducks. Now, obviously, in the Pacific Division, and obviously with the Anaheim Ducks, it was probably one of the weakest divisions last year in terms of hockey. We know where a lot of these teams ended up in the standings last year. Is this year going to be a different year? I mean, if you look at the Ducks, they've made some acquisitions this offseason for sure. The key arrivals, you look at guys like Alex Killorn, Radko Gudas, Robert Hagg, Ilya Lyubushkin, and then Alex Stalock, who they brought in as well off free agency. And they didn't really lose anybody big. Max Comtois, Derek Grant, Nathan Beaulieu, Simon Benoit, Kevin Shattenkirk, and Anthony Stolarz. They also re-signed Troy Terry and Lucas Dostal. As we're recording this video, Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale have signed. Obviously the score thing is not updated fully, but Zegras and Drysdale have signed, so that's a big boost for the Ducks going into the start of the year. And just some rookies that could potentially crack the lineup. As you know, Pavel Mintyukov, who was a first-round pick in 2022, and Olen Zellweger, who was a second-round pick in 2021, are both currently still on the Ducks roster. This preseason still, as we get down to the wire here going into the regular season. So this is what Daily Faceoff has as the lines for the Ducks. They have Carlson, Zegras, and Troy Terry. Now, Leo Carlson left due to an injury in preseason. We don't know the extent of the injury and how long he'll be out, but it likely means that he doesn't start the season for the Ducks. And then obviously, if you look at their top six and their top nine, it's not the best top six, but it's definitely not the worst. There was a lot of concern at the start of preseason as to whether or not Trevor Zegras was going to sign and actually be able to start the season. It looks like he will. He's ready to go, and the Ducks get themselves a big boost on offense. Looking at their decor, I mean, listen, it's a decor. Whether it's good or not is another question, but there's some decent guys here. I mean, Lyubushkin, who they got from Buffalo. I think he'll be a good top six guy. Gudas, who had a really good playoff success. I think he's going to help out the Ducks defensively. Drysdale being back on the back end. Zellweger, if he makes the team, along with Mintyukov, I think are two young guys that can, show their potential. So the Ducks are a young team. And then obviously, if you look at their goaltending situation with John Gibson and Lucas Dostal, there's expectations that this team could have a better year than they did last year, and maybe be more exciting. Last year, they were looked at as a boring team. They weren't necessarily always the most fun to watch. But, at the end of the day, they changed coaches. They brought in Greg Cronin, who looks like is going to be a better coach. And I think they're going to be a funner team to watch. They're definitely young, so they're going to be fun to watch. And I think for me, it's going to be another rough year. In terms of just points tallies, I think they're going to finish seventh in the Pacific Division. I think there's one team that's worse than them, but I think they're going to finish seventh in the Pacific Division, and it's going to be another growing year for the Ducks, but it's going to be fun, and they've got a lot of prospects, so it's going to be exciting to see how they develop and how they move forward.
Yeah, the Ducks have definitely some promise, and you mentioned it before. They have Trevor Zegras and Jamie Drysdale, who have re-signed recently. And I guess for Ducks fans, it was a whole month of September where you're kind of getting a little stressed out. You're like, we're approaching the regular season. We're into training camp, and these guys are not re-signed yet. And then they re-sign, and it wasn't projected on the screen, but Jamie Drysdale is going to be making $2.3 million for the next couple of years, and Trevor Zegras around the 4.5 range. And those are very team-friendly contracts.
5.5 range. 5.5.
5.5. Yeah. Still, very team-friendly. Considering this guy led the team and Zegras led the team in points last year, plays the center position, and is the cornerstone piece of this team. And Drysdale, same thing, already a top 4 defenseman in this league. So they got them on very team-friendly deals. And now you look at their cap situation, and they have about $9 million to work with. And you have some trade pieces like Jakob Silverberg and Adam Henrique, who are making about $5 million, a little bit over, both of them. And I just see it this way, Luca. This team is going to be fun to watch, like you said. Adam Henrique and Silverberg are going to get their reps because those are going to be the guys that they're going to trade at the deadline and acquire picks for. But I don't think it's this team is in the rebuild stage of we're going to be shitty for the next couple of years. I think next year they're 100% going to try to get better because they have $9 million in cap space. They sign Alex Killorn, Radko Gudas. They're going to have Silverberg, Henrique off the books. So they're going to have a lot of wiggle room financially to add some veteran pieces to this young core. And this young core is good. Troy Terry is also got re-signed for 7 years, $7 million, off of 2 consecutive 60-point seasons, 37 goals, not this past year, but the year prior. So they have the pieces, and Leo Carlson coming into the mix and who looks to be ready to go right away. Obviously not for the regular season, but in terms of his development as a prospect. And if you scroll down to the decor, if you scroll down a little bit.
Yeah, sorry, just give me a second.
Yeah, no problem. And yeah, so you still have Cam Fowler there, but it's a shaky decor, and that's why they're not a competitive team yet. You'd likely want to see another supporting top 4 option for that team. And you didn't mention, but John Gibson, there was a lot of he's been in the trades rumor mill for the past year, and he hasn't been traded. And I don't think he's going to get traded anymore. I think he's going to play out the full year in Anaheim, and that bodes well for them. So this team is going to be fun to watch. You're going to see more growth from their young players. They're going to approach the deadline situation as being sellers, but I don't have them as 7th. I actually have them as 8th in the Pacific Division.
Wow.
And we'll get into why I have them below the team that we're basically not mentioning right now.
So we're gonna move on to the Arizona Coyotes. So
that's a quick turnaround.
Yeah. So we're gonna move on to the why is it Calgary Flames in it? Anyways, we're gonna move on to Calgary. So let's just go straight to Calgary. So if you go to Calgary, they've added some guys straight out of the out of the offseason. They've added Igor Sharangovich and obviously Jordan Osterley. One of the biggest things that I could say about Calgary is, they're a good team. I think that they've shown last year that, they weren't necessarily at their best, but I think they're better than people probably gave them credit for. I think Sutter held them back a lot last year, which in turn affected, their playoff chances and affected their season. In terms of who they lost, I mean, listen, they didn't really lose anybody big. Tyler Toffoli probably being the biggest guy they lost there. I think that was just more of a situation of the fact that I think there needed to be a change of scenery there. He didn't like the approach that I think teams were kind of putting themselves into, and so for that reason, it affected, the way things went in Calgary. And then obviously, if you look at some guys that could crack the lineup, there's been some talk about Matthew Coronado, who I believe is still on the Flames roster as we speak. Jacob Pelletier, who was expected to crack the roster, unfortunately for him, did suffer an injury, so he will miss the start of the year. And then there was Dustin Wolf, who I believe, and I can't believe Calgary still has him in the minors. He's in the minors right now. He's in the AHL. They decided to stick with Dan Vladar and Jacob Markstrom, and to be honest, I think that that's a big mistake on Calgary's part. Very disappointed with that. I'm not too keen on this Calgary team. I think they're a good team. I think that they've got some good players, but I just think that a lot of the decisions they've made have been very questionable, just in terms of their goaltending and in terms of some of the fact that they didn't really make any big moves. They brought in Craig Conroy as GM. They have a new coach this year as well, so it's going to be interesting to see how they play. And look, their top 6 is not bad. I mean, Huberto, Lindholm, Mangiapane is a decent first line. Coronado, who's a really good prospect, along with Backlund, who was named captain, and then Igor Sharangovich is not bad. Their top 9 is pretty good. I would even say Blake Coleman might be able to slot into those top 9, even top 6 roles. So on forward, we know that they're capable of being a good team offensively. Then you look at their decor, and it's very well balanced. Their top 4 is pretty good: Mackenzie Weegar, Rasmus Anderson. You know, you look at Noah Hanifin, Chris Tanev, Nikita Zadorov, Jordan Osterley. All these guys are big, big defensemen, solid defensemen. They're a decent decor. Obviously, no Oliver Shillington again this year, which is going to take an effect on them. For me, the problem with Calgary goes back to their goaltending situation with Jacob Markstrom and Dan Vladar. I like Markstrom. I've always liked Markstrom, but he's very inconsistent. And the problem with Jacob Markstrom is you put yourself in a tough position when you have Jacob Markstrom, because one day you're going to get a goalie that could be a Vezina caliber goaltender, and the next year you might get a goalie that's shitting the bed, and we don't know what you're going to get from him. And Vladar as well, as much as he's played well in certain situations, I don't think he's necessarily the answer to their problems. And they have a goaltender in Dustin Wolf, obviously, who looks good, has won pretty much every single AHL trophy you can think of. They have an opportunity to use this guy and see what they have in him, and it just doesn't make sense to me that they have not, they sent him down to the minors. There's an expectation he might play at some point during the season, but I don't know, man. I think if this team can find their scoring rhythm, and if Huberto can bounce back, and if their decor can still stay solid and they can get decent goaltending, this is a team that can crack easily a wild card spot and be in the top 4 in their division. But if they have another year like they had last year, it's going to be a long season for them. So for me, I think their question mark, like I said, is going to be in net. I'm not sure with Jacob Markstrom if he's going to have a good year this year. I have Calgary going 5th, the same position they finished last year. And I do believe that they're going to finish there. I don't know. I think they're going to probably be maybe in the final wild card spot, or they're going to just miss out. But I don't think that it's going to be a fantastic season for them. I think it's going to be another learning curve again this year.
Yeah, well, I think the biggest positive that came out of this offseason is the coaching change, getting rid of Daryl Sutter there, and they bring in an assistant coach who's been an assistant with them for 5 years. He's going to be really looking to prove himself. And I look at the guys that didn't perform well under Sutter, and I look at Jonathan Huberdeau, who I think is still at 30 years old, is still a very good hockey player. And you have Nazem Kadri, who had a decent year last year, but he's going to get another year to establish himself at a new team. And on their decor, Mackenzie Weegar didn't have a good year by any accounts. A lot of his points were on the power play, and if you look at his 5-on-5 metrics, he was really struggling last year. And I think he's a guy who, I think Mackenzie Weegar, I don't think he was a one-off in Florida. I think he's a good hockey player. And I think their decor is still very, very serviceable with the guys they have. Hanifin, Rasmus Anderson, Chris Tanev. Hanifin hasn't been traded yet. And a lot of people are thinking that him and a number of guys like Lindholm, for example, are going to get traded because they have a year left. This team doesn't have the direction or the cap space to bring these guys back. So, but you got Igor Sharangovich, Matt Coronado. Sorry, I have a hard time pronouncing that. But that's gonna add some juice and some fuel to their top 6. And look, they have 3 capable centers down the middle. They have proven winger in Jonathan Huberdeau. They got the good depth pieces. Dylan Dubé, Mangiapane is a dynamic player in my opinion. And I think this is going to be a pretty good forward core who could, once they could be let loose and stop playing the Daryl Sutter style of hockey. I think this forward group is going to do very well this year. And on special teams, they have a chance to rebound this year, given another year of Mackenzie Weegar, who's usually so good on the power play. And then you go down to their goaltending, and Markstrom is. I feel like you said, year by year, it's like flipping a coin with him. But I think Jacob Markstrom is an elite goaltender. If you look at what he could offer and all the attributes that he is elite. and it's just about getting him in the right state of mind. And the fact that they have Dustin Wolf, who's been, he's basically not knocking at the door. It's not a bad problem to have when you have three goalies who are capable. Vladar also, it's not a bad problem to have, because if their goaltending situation is struggling, and you have a new head coach who's gotta provide some results, then he's just gonna ride the hot hand, and that's good for your hockey team. If you're getting the higher percentage performance out of your goalies, then you're not complaining. This is a good team. They're not a great team, and I don't think they ever were a great team, even when they won the Pacific Division 2 years ago. Yes, they did have Matthew Tkachuk, but the team didn't do much in the playoffs. Um,
Yeah.
they'll be in the wild card hunt this year. I don't know if I could guarantee that they'll make it. If their goaltending approach is like I mentioned, and their goaltending is very good, then this team definitely has a chance to be closer to 100 points than people think in the West, because the West is
Mm.
is is weaker than the Eastern Conference, in my opinion. I think this is a good hockey team, but right now with new coach, a lot of uncertainty. People don't know where to place, and especially guys like I mentioned, Huberto, who didn't have one of his greater years last year. People don't know where to place this team, but they are a good hockey team, and I think more likely than not they'll be in a wild card seating.
Yeah. So obviously with Calgary, I mean, for them, it's going to be a struggle. I think their division is probably one of the weaker divisions, so they might have a chance in terms of, you know, just trying to make the playoffs. But I think there's better teams in their division, and I think obviously if you look at who we're going to talk about next, I think they're going to give them a good run for their money, and that's the Edmonton Oilers, who's just across the bridge from them in the other part of Alberta. They're going to be a team to watch this year as well. But even them, similar to Calgary, didn't make many moves during the offseason. In fact, only made really two moves that were key in Connor Brown and Lane Pedersen. They did lose out on they did lose Kyler Yamamoto. They also lost Klim Kostin, who they traded away. Ryan Murray, who they ended up letting go as an unsigned free agent. But for the most part, they kept their team intact. They kind of just got rid of a lot of their depth guys, and then they re-signed obviously Evan Bouchard and Ryan McLeod, who were two big pieces that they brought back. And then rookies that could crack the lineup, obviously Xavier Bourgault and Raphael Lavoie. But the Oilers, we all know about Edmonton, right? Everybody knows the capabilities that the Oilers have. Everybody knows where Edmonton is going to go and how far they're going to go. And that's going to be dependent on the top two centers in Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. Basically, how well they play is going to determine how far the Oilers go. To me, this is a team that, look, their top six is good. It's not fantastic, but it's good. And when you're playing with McDavid and Draisaitl, you put yourself in a position to succeed all the time. And then obviously their third and fourth line is a little bit more, of a different story. They don't really have anything. Wow, I think Dylan Holloway might take a step this year. Evander Kane, where we know to expect from him, a guy who could score 25, 30 goals. Ryan Nugent Hopkins, who last year had a really good year, along with Zach Hyman. It's a good top six. It's not a wow top six. There's nothing to scream home about. We know what the Oilers are made of. We know that they're reliant on McDavid and Draisaitl,
Well,
and
that
they're
is a
going to
wow.
continue.
That is not the cut you off, but that is a wow top six in my opinion. Anytime you have Draisaitl and McDavid in your top six, those top two lines are going to be
Yeah,
banging,
but I'm
especially
saying
with
like
Nugent Hopkins and the other guys there.
I'm saying in terms of like their supporting cast, to me, I think like in terms of where Edmonton's at, like Connor Brown should not be on your top six, in my opinion. He's a top nine player. I'd probably have Dylan Holloway there. The other thing too is Zach Hyman's a good player, but I don't know if he's a top six player. Yes, I don't know if he's a first line player. I know he's listed on the second line here. It's definitely good. I know Oilers fans might get upset with me on saying that they're not a wild top six, but I think it's just because I think we've all expected a little bit more from Edmonton over the last couple of years, and they just haven't delivered. Their bottom six is also very weak, apart from the fact that they have a lot of depth guys, but they don't have the depth necessarily to score goals. They have depth guys. They have guys. Janmark's a decent player. We know Fogle, what he's capable of doing. Derek Ryan's been there for a while, but they need guys that are going to be able to put the puck in the net, and they're very defensive, right? Their bottom six is very defensive, but it's not necessarily a question of whether they're going to be able to keep the puck out of the net. Yes, they have to do that, but they also need to provide some depth scoring when McDavid and Draisaitl aren't at their best, which is very rare. So for Edmonton, I mean, look, we know what they're capable of. Like I said before, it's McDavid and Draisaitl show. It's always going to be. Their decor didn't improve. They brought back Evan Bouchard, but they didn't do much else. It's pretty much the same decor as last year, which begs the question as to, what the expectation is for the Oilers again this season. Darnell Nurse struggled last year. Their one bright spot was Evan Bouchard. Kulak's a good top six defenseman. They brought in Ekholm, who made a difference last year. But Cody Ceci on your top pair is definitely concerning. Obviously, that could change over the course of the season. And then in net, the one positive that the Oilers have is they have two capable goaltenders, both in Stuart Skinner and in Jack Campbell, who I think can really do the job for the Oilers. Skinner last year, very good year. Jack Campbell, struggled at times, but I think was on just had a rough year. I think we know that Jack Campbell's a very good goaltender, and I think he's capable of bouncing back. I think he might be able to this year. And according to what their coach said, is that they might split starts this year, at least to start the year. So they're both going to have opportunities to give the Oilers a chance to win. For me, I could never bet against Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl. They're going to finish in a playoff spot. I think they're going to finish third, though. I don't think last year they finished second. They were right behind Vegas. I think this year they're going to finish third. I think there's two teams that are better than them that I think are going to have a better year in the regular season than the Edmonton Oilers. So,
yeah. Well, Edmonton is a team now that's a perennial playoff team. I don't see that changing this year, especially since you still have McDavid and Draisaitl in their primes.
Yeah.
I disagree with you with their top six. I think their top six is pretty much perfect. You just need one guy to really play with McDavid. And Evander Kane as a 25-30 goal scorer is going to provide a lot of support for him. And the other guy is just a facilitator or an energy guy or whatever. You don't need him to do much. And Connor Brown is proven as a top 9. So it's not bad. It's not bad that he's there. It's not ideal, but it's not going to affect the line in any way. And Nugent Hopkins and Draisaitl on your second line that's just quality with Zach Hyman. Their bottom six has got no scoring depth, and this has been a perennial problem for them. And on their decor, the right side is not very good at all. Evan Bouchard, yes, he's got he's got some flair to him, and he had a very good year last year, and that's why he got the contract extension. But Darnell Nurse, I know he fits the prototype of a top pairing defenseman, but he makes too many mistakes, and I just don't think he has the offensive flair that people would have expected out of him. Look, he's got the physical attributes, he's got the size, he's got the skill and all that, but there's something missing with him. He doesn't have the same dynamic ability as other big offensive defensemen in this league. And Matthias Ekholm, yes, they're getting a full year out of him. It's gonna help them. Matthias Ekholm is a very good top 4 defenseman, but I see Cody Ceci on the top pairing, and I'm like, that's brutal. That's very brutal because I view him as a bottom pairing defenseman, and they don't really have much support in their bottom pairing either. And in the pipeline, there's not much going on. So this is a very average decor that they thought they solved with the Matthias Ekholm trade. They did solve for the time being, but for this season, they're gonna need more than that. And just like their bottom six, they're gonna need help. I don't like their goaltending one bit. I'm not a big fan of Stuart Skinner. I know he had a good year last year, led them to the playoffs. I don't see a high likelihood of that repeating. Jack Campbell is a 1B goalie at best. But given the fact that they have McDavid and Draisaitl who are firing on all cylinders, and their power play is going to be scoring, there's going to be a lot of games like usual where they're going to be just simply outscoring the other team, and I think that's good enough to get them a top. It's crazy to say, but that's good enough to get them a top 3 in this division, and I think that's what's going to happen.
Do you think they're going to finish third as well?
Yeah, I think they're going to finish third.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with a lot of your points. Maybe looking back at it, I might be underestimating how good the Oilers' top 6 is. Look, I think the problem with Edmonton is kind of the similar one to Carolina and Toronto, where it's like, look, they have good players, but they haven't shown much with those guys. And so that's why I always get a little bit pessimistic, just because I'm like, look, I know you guys have good players, but at the end of the day, it needs to be proven on the ice, right? And I just don't think that Edmonton has always done that or always been able to show people how good they've been, especially because they're supposed to be better than what I think they've shown lately. Moving
Yeah,
on to go.
wait, I just want to say one thing on Edmonton. The scary thing about this team is that McDavid has proven now in the this past playoffs that he could win playoff series and even the year prior on his own.
Yeah,
And that's so scary because if you get this guy in the right situation, if they do add another top 6 winger and they add a top 4 defenseman, which is unlikely. Let's say they do that. This team is going to be like this team is going to be scary come
yeah.
playoff time, especially in the West. They're going to be so dynamic. I
Agreed.
don't think any team other than Colorado in that situation would be able to keep up with them.
I agree, but I think they should already be like, you know what I mean? I think they should already be scary. I know their decor isn't the best, and that's been a criticism for a long time. And even to some extent, I think their bottom 6 has been a criticism. But at the end of the day, man, like, you have two of the best players in the world in Leon Draisaitl and Connor McDavid. Like, they should already be scary. And like you said before, McDavid could win a series on his own if he's in the right situation. I just think they need to have better supporting casts around them. And I think sometimes they don't always add like that legendary piece that can get them over the top. It was supposed to be Evander Kane. It ended up not being that, or at least it wasn't last year. And it wasn't Ryan Nugent Hopkins either, right? So that's the only thing that I know. Obviously, cap space plays a factor, but I think for the Oilers, that's got to be they got to take a step this year, not only
Yeah,
during the regular season, but even in the playoffs.
agreed. Well, it's not only on their pro scouting department, but on their amateur scouting because
Yeah.
they've had about five to something years now of McDavid, Draisaitl in their prime, and they haven't
Yeah.
had guys in the pipeline, the guys that they draft that are going to come in and be those missing pieces that they needed either.
Yeah,
But moving
that's true.
on,
Let's go. So moving on to, in my opinion, my favorite team of the offseason. And I think the team that I think is going to have a fantastic season, and that's the LA Kings. They made the biggest move of the offseason, picking up Pierre-Luc Dubois and signing him to an 8-year deal at $8.5 million after the trade. They brought in Cam Talbot as well. They brought in David Riddick. They bolstered their goaltending a little bit. Obviously, key departures. They lost a lot of guys, a lot of young guys, but obviously they also lost some pretty interesting players. They lost Korpisalo and Cal Peterson, who they moved over to Philly, Philly and Ottawa respectively. Korpisalo obviously signed with Ottawa in free agency. Cal Peterson was traded. Along with Sean Walker. They traded Sean Dursey. They traded Gabe Velarde, but they changed their team around a little bit. I think they're going a little bit more youth this year compared to in previous years. They also re-signed Anze Kopitar and Vladislav Gavrikov, who are two very good players that are going to help the Kings get over the top. And then some guys that could crack the lineup. Unfortunately, none of these guys have actually cracked the lineup. Samuel Fagemo, who was put on waivers, was actually claimed by Nashville, and Turcotte and Brandt Clark are currently in the AHL. However, would not be surprised to see them at some point get called up during the season. But if you look at the Kings, to me, man, this is the epitome of what a playoff team and what a solid team that can do both in the regular season and the playoffs is supposed to look like. Their top 9 is fantastic, okay? Anze Kopitar, Quinton Byfield, Adrian Kempe, not the best top 6, but it's definitely good. I think you can argue that Kevin Fiala, Pierre-Luc Dubois, and maybe Adrian Kempe would be a better second line. You can interchange every single one of these guys and put them on any line and they'll work. Their third line of Trevor Moore, Philip Danault, and Victor Arvidsson is fantastic as well. Arthur Kaliev being in the top 6. He's a guy that can score goals. If he can hit 20, 25 goals this year, that's big for them. And then their fourth line, I mean, it's a lot of toughness, a lot of grit, but also a lot of guys that can potentially put the puck in the net and be difference makers for them. And then if you look at their decor, I mean, obviously we know what Drew Doughty's capable of. We know of Mikey Anderson, Vladislav Gavrikov, and Matt Roy are underrated players. Bjorn Fott, who's a decent defenseman, and then you have Jordan Spence as well. Young top 6, but I think they're decent players. And you have Brandt Clark coming up. You have Alex Laferriere on forward and Alex Turcotte, who could also come up and be difference makers during the season in case you deal with injuries. The only thing with LA, I think, is going to be a net. That's my only concern with LA is their goaltending with Copley and Talbot. I don't think they added themselves an established number one. I think they're relying on Felix Copley a little bit too much and on Cam Talbot. But for me, I think everything else that LA has done, everything that they've done this offseason, I think has been good. I know they haven't necessarily added much in terms of goaltending. That is great. And I know that they didn't really add maybe another top four or another top two defenseman that could help them. But I think that Todd McLellan's a really good coach. He gets the best out of his players. And if their goaltending can hold up, if Cam Talbot can remain healthy and be decent and stop the puck and be a decent goaltender for them as a 1B, I think they have a good chance. I think if Copley can play the way he played last year at times and still be a decent goaltender for them and kind of hold them up, I think this team has the opportunity to do something special. So for that reason, I'm a big fan of LA. I'm going to hop on their hype train a little bit. I have them actually finishing second in this division above Edmonton, which might surprise some people. But I'm absolutely all in with LA. I think Dubois is going to have a career year. I think Fiala is going to be fantastic. It's going to be fun to watch in LA for sure.
Yeah,
So
it's definitely exciting. It's for the first time in a while for LA fans. I know they've been in the playoffs the past couple of years now, but
yeah,
they made the big trade. They acquired Pierre-Luc Dubois. They had centers and they're like, you know what? F it. We're gonna get another big time center.
it's true.
And yeah, and another step this year for Quinton Byfield, who I don't think people should write off yet. I think Quinton Byfield is going to establish himself as a nice top six player at least in this league. You got Arthur Kaliev, who I feel really good about. Kevin Fiala, he's on the second line, but Kevin Fiala has been a star. Let's just say he's been elite for the past couple, even in Minnesota and before he
Yep.
got traded. Kevin Fiala has been elite. Pierre-Luc Dubois is borderline elite, depending on where you see him with his size and his skill. Having a guy like that in the playoffs is a big boost for them. Anze Kopitar is still doing his thing. Adrian Kempe is a proven player. Victor Arvidsson could still score goals. Philip Deneau had another good year last year. And Trevor Moore is carved out a role for himself on this team. This is, like you said, the top nine, and the bottom three doesn't even matter. The top nine is going to be so good. I see this team scoring a ton of goals. They're going to be so hard to play against 5-on-5 because these are guys that could defend, that could transition, and that could score. They could do everything.
Yeah.
And I think that their offense alone is such a big asset that regardless of their average goaltending, which I think is very average, because yes, they don't have the true number one, but the problem is they don't have a true number two either, I think.
Yeah.
I watched a lot of Cam Talbot last year as an Ottawa fan. I know he dealt with injury, but he's doesn't have it anymore. I think he's the type of backup now than 25 games. And if you don't have an established starter, then that's going to be a problem for you. The overall team save percentage is going to be a problem for this team. I feel, but they're I think unlike LA in the past, this team is going to score a lot of goals. Their decor is pretty good in my opinion. Drew Doughty has still got it. Gavrikov is awesome, and you got Mike Anderson and Matt Roy. I know they lost Sean Walker,
Yeah. And Sean Dursey.
and Sean Dursey exactly in the off season. Those were two nice pieces, but those are pieces that are definitely replaceable. And I take a guy like Gavrikov over both of those guys, who's a true top four. So I don't think this decor suffers by any accounts. What I'm interested to see, because I noticed I think we could lock this in. This team is going to make the playoffs, but what I'm interested to see is when they're in the playoffs, how much damage they could do. Because if a team like this is healthy and they get the goaltending right in the playoffs, man, this team this is another team. Like I said, the what ifs before with Edmonton. I think this team has less what ifs, and if this team in the playoffs is going to be very dangerous. Regular season, they're going to be a nightmare 5-on-5. They're going to score a ton of goals, and I think that alone is going to get them to the postseason. And I have them number one in the Pacific Division, even
Wow.
with bad goaltending. I know it's bold, but I think this team is going to maybe they'll fix the goaltending. Maybe Dave Rittich is gonna have a couple of those magical games like he had. Bubble Dave Rittich had some great games for
Oh my
Calgary.
god!
Maybe he's gonna surprise people. But I have this team number one in the Pacific Division.
Wow.
I think they're a powerhouse in so many areas.
Yeah, like you said, I think the only real thing that is a concern is, like you said, it's the goaltending. I think they can definitely get one though if they find that during the season they're not getting the best goaltending. I think they might, there's some goaltenders that teams would be willing to move. Look, I'm looking at Calgary, Dan Vladar or even Dustin Wolf to some extent if they ever need a goaltender. I think they can definitely improve their goaltending a little bit during the offseason if they struggle, but like you said, this team is just they're really underrated, and I think that they're so good in just the way they play and in terms of chemistry, and Todd McLellan gets the best out of these guys that I think the sky's the limit for them, like you said. That's why I have them second. I don't have them first, for obvious reasons. We're going to get into it soon, but I do have them second. I think they're going to be a lock for the playoffs, in my opinion. Um, so just moving on to the next team, which is the San Jose Sharks. Now, some people might look at this offseason and be, happy about it. Some people might look at it and say that it's was disappointing. In my opinion, I think they had a better offseason than a lot of people give them credit for, but I'm just not high on them as a hockey team. So this is where my concern comes in for San Jose. They're a good team. You look at the key arrivals they brought in: Anthony Duclair, Mikael Granlund, Mike Hoffman, Philip Zadina, just to name a few, Mackenzie Blackwood, Jan Ruda. They brought in some guys that I think, in terms of where they're at, it was obviously going to be a little bit of, a transition year for them. But I think they've brought in some decent NHL players that can definitely help their roster out. Key departure, the big one, obviously being Erik Karlsson, who ended up in Pittsburgh, which I think is going to be a huge loss for them on the back end, not simply for the defensive side of the game, but more so for the offensive side of the game, and also just from a defensive standpoint. And then just some guys that can crack the roster. I don't think any of these kids are. But if you look at just the Sharks, I think they're not necessarily the best team on paper. Look, if you look at their team, Zadina, underperforming forward. He might be able to come in to San Jose and change, people's minds on him. Thomas Hurdle's really good. Hoffman, from the time that I've watched him in Montreal, he hasn't been that impressive. Maybe under a new coach and a new system, he might be good, but I don't think he's going to do much for San Jose. William Eklund, I'm high on. I think he's going to have a good year for him. I think it's going to be a better year after a guy who came off injuries last year. Granlund, again, in Pittsburgh, just struggled. He's not really necessarily the best. Luke Cunnin, again, not the best player. Their third line's nice. I like Barabanov. I'm a big fan of Thomas Bordeleau, and I like Anthony Duclair. And then their fourth line is also a little bit, term, and Jacob Peterson, who might not even be there. They threw him on waivers. Their decor is weak. Okay, their offense might score some goals. They have young talent. They have a lot of players that I think are there to prove themselves. Duclair is a guy that can score you 20 goals. He's done it in Ottawa. Um, he's a good guy that I think could be decent on your top 9, top 6. So I think he can help them out. But on defense, they're weak. They're full on weak. Mario Ferraro is a really good defenseman. Matt Benning should not be your top 2 defenseman on any team. Mark-Edward Vlasic is washed and not the player that he was. Kyle Burrows is just not the best. Nikolai Nijov, same thing. John Ruda, same thing. Like they have one of the worst decors in the league. I think they probably have the worst decor in the league. It's going to be rough. They're going to let in a lot of goals this year, and it's not going to be pretty. And then in net, I mean, they have Blackwood and they have Kaapo Kähkönen. Kähkönen last year looked okay, wasn't always at his best, struggled behind a weak defense. I think it's going to be another case this year. Mackenzie Blackwood might turn it around. I think there's expectation that he will. For me, under the weak decor, I'm just not sure, man. I'm not sure about this team at all. I like their offense, like I said. It's not as bad as I think people think, but their offensive acquisitions haven't been wow. There's a lot of risk. They're gonna have trouble. They're gonna have trouble keeping the puck out of the net, and I think they're gonna score goals. I don't think it's gonna be a lot, but I think they're going to score goals. They're gonna have a couple of games where they're gonna be fun to watch. But ultimately, the Sharks are in rebuild mode, and I think they're going to finish dead last in this division. I don't really have much else to say about the Sharks. I think they've had a decent offseason, but it's not much that they can do at that point, and they had to bolster their decor, and they just didn't.
Yeah, I'm
So
gonna start off by apologizing to our fans. I had my list of where I thought every team was gonna fall in this division, and I completely forgot to mention San Jose when we were talking about the Anaheim Ducks, because I do, just like you, I would have Anaheim seventh and this team eighth in the division. This team
yeah,
is so bad. Um, their first line is gonna incorporate Philip Zadina and Mike Hoffman, potentially two guys that, their fan bases in previous years were, well, Detroit fan were giving him a chance, but not last year. They're like, get these guys away. They're low intensity. They just want to be beauties. They just want to snipe the puck. They have a lot of flaws to their game, but they do have a good opportunity here to potentially get traded at the deadline to a team that's going to contend, score a bunch of goals. They're going to see a lot of ample power play time on this team. Thomas Hurdle is there. He's still a stud. He's their big trade piece. They added Michael Granlund also on a short-term deal. Obviously, the trade for Anthony Duclair, which was a cap casualty for Florida.
yeah,
Those are two good players, and then once again, this team is I look at their forward group and I see it as an open market. Half of these guys are going to get traded. They're going to stockpile a bunch of draft picks, because that's what this organization needs. Their pipeline has been devastated because of all the years of Joe Thornton and Patrick Marleau, where they were so competitive, and they mortgaged a lot of futures to take that team to the next level. They were in the Stanley Cup Finals once. Didn't repeat the year after they traded Erik Karlsson and give. Oh, I know I'm a Sens fan, and I'm gonna just laughing to the bank about the return on that trade, but they lost so much. They lost, you lost Josh Norris, Tim Stützle.
yeah,
There's another prospect I'm not mentioning, and roster players. They lost. That was a big L for them in that trade. Um, and it's considering what they got trading him to Pittsburgh in comparison. Barabanov, a big fan of him. So I just see that, yeah, the forward group. There's not much to say about it other than they have some good players. They could interchange them a lot, and a lot of these guys are going to be. They're not going to be San Jose Sharks by the end of the year, and their decor is just let's not talk about it.
yeah.
The
It's
decor,
just
it's so bad.
it's
It's
it's awful.
I'm not even a fan of Mario Ferraro. I'm not a big fan of him. Um I don't think you could trust him, but he has to be your Mark Mathot on if you're having him on your top pairing. He has to be in complement to somebody who has that offensive upside. And with Matt Benning, they don't have that, not at all. They don't have that with any guy. Jan Ruda a little bit. Um, this is not a good team. Their goaltending is not good either. Um, let's just go. If you want to do an over or under on their total wins this year for this team, you go under 30.
I would say under 25. I'd
I'd say
even
like
go
this.
that far.
This is a 22 win hockey team. That's my pick. So under 25, I say this is a 22 win hockey team.
Yeah, they're not good. And I don't even want to like continue to keep talking about them. I'm sorry, Sharks fans. It's going to be a rough year for you guys. But listen, Macklin Celebrini is going to be available at 1, so it's going to be nice to have you guys there. Moving on to, I think, in my opinion, probably the best story of the NHL last year. But also at the same time, I think they're going to have probably a little bit of a kickback to reality this year. And that's the Seattle Kraken. Listen, for me, there's a couple of things that I look at when I look at Seattle, and that's they've had a good year. I think they were better last year than they were in year one. Obviously, they made the playoffs for the first time in franchise history. They've added Brian Dumoulin and Kyler Yamamoto, but they've lost a lot of guys. Daniel Sprong, who was a big player for them. Morgan Geekie was a big player for them. Martin Jones, who was not really a huge loss, but he did win them a lot of games. They did re-sign Vince Dunn to a big contract after a career year like that. But in terms of where Seattle is at this point, I just don't know if they're as good as Edmonton, if they're as good as LA. I don't know if they're in that hunt for the playoffs. I'm not sure what to think about this team. They did well. Their top nine is good. It's a very decent top nine. They have a lot of very good players. Oliver Bjorkstrand, Eli Tolvanen, we know what they're capable of. Obviously, Matty Beniers and Jared McCann are two really good players. Burakovsky is going to look for a better year after the injury that he dealt with. But at the same time, I'm just not sure, man. I look at their defense; it's good, not great. Their top four is not bad. Their top six is okay. It's not amazing, but it's again not terrible. Vince Dunn had a good year. Adam Larson's decent. They're average. They're a very average team, and even in terms of goaltending, again, Grubauer the last 2 years hasn't been at his best. Chris Drieger didn't even play last year; he was injured, so they're expecting him to come in and be a difference maker. For Seattle, I think it's going to be another year again where it's going to be fun, and I think it's going to be enjoyable, and I think they're going to have a decent season. I think they're going to be in the top four. They're going to be probably maybe ahead of Calgary. Those two might be interchangeable. They might make the playoffs for that first wild card spot like they were last year. But I just think that they're an average team. They're not more than average, and it's not for me to try to. I'm not even trying to say that in a disrespectful way. They're good at everything. They don't really have a weakness, but at the same time, they're probably not supposed to be as good as they are, but they are, if that makes sense. And so for me, I think that in general, they're going to probably be in that hunt for the playoffs. And I think they're going to kind of be in the same position they were last year. I think they're going to be fourth. I think they're going to be probably fighting for a wild card spot or in that wild card spot position. And that's about it. And, in terms of what they've added, nothing much. They've added Dumoulin, and that's about it. But I don't necessarily think they needed to. I think they played decent hockey last year that they could afford to do that. So that's kind of my opinion on it. I think they're going to finish fourth. So
I have this team finishing fifth in the Pacific, below Calgary. For
yeah,
me, but it doesn't mean I don't think they're going to be in the mix. I think they'll be in the wild card mix into the end. I see the likelihood of them making it maybe 20%. This is a team on the up. Matty Beniers has had a breakout season last year. They have an array of very talented wingers. They're going to be patient. Shane Wright I don't think is going to my prediction from what I'm reading is that he won't start the year in Seattle. I think
yeah,
he'll get some time in the A, and this is an organization that has, since they're a new organization and they haven't really put expectations on themselves, that they could
yeah,
afford to be patient with a Shane Wright, who I think is a prospect. Give him his time, and he'll become the player you want him to be under the right circumstance. So I'm not worried about him. Look at his forward group. I see a lot of speed and skill. These guys are gonna be fun to watch. It's a good group. It's not it's good enough to be average in the NHL, but it's not a world beater. And for the defensemen, for the defensive group, I'm more
yeah,
excited about that being on the rise this year. Vince Dunn had an incredible year last year. I'm a big fan of his. Adam Larson has shown that he's still a solid top four defenseman in this league. You got Dumoulin and Justin Schultz, who were teammates in Pittsburgh when they won the Cup 2 years consecutively, and that should be a stabilizing pairing for them. But there's also Riker Evans, who
yeah.
I think is going to make the team this year. I know he's not listed on
You think so?
on this website at being a part of their top six, but I think Riker Evans is a good player. I think he's going to crack the top six of this decor consistently. Um, so I think there's some upside there with their decor. Their goaltending obviously got worse, but it's not. I don't know if I want to say they got worse. I think Philip Grubauer can't be relied on too much with his health. But I think he's a decent goalie. Chris Drieger is he's good in that spot. This is a good tandem. If they're healthy, this is a good tandem.
Yeah,
Um, but if Grubauer is not healthy, then this could de-escalate very, very quickly. So there's that risk there. Yeah, this is an expansion team that's going to be entering their third. Is it their third season now in
Yeah,
the
it's
league?
third season.
Their third season. They're on the up. They have the organizational depth. This is good. They won't fans should maybe tone it down because I don't think they're going to make the playoffs like they did last year.
Yeah.
But this is still going to be a good team. There's going to be a lot of growth, and there's a lot to be happy about with them.
Yeah, I would agree. I think, like I said, I think they're gonna fight for a wild card spot this year. We'll see where they go, but I don't. I think it's gonna be just another one of those years where it's gonna be fun, but I don't know. They're not anywhere near contending yet, and they need to add a few more guys before they can get there. I want to move on, just because we don't have much time left to continue this video, so we're gonna try to move it up as quickly as possible. But I want to move on to the Vancouver Canucks, who I think for me this year are going to need to take a step forward. Do I think they will? Absolutely not. I think that this is a team that, they made some decent acquisitions. Carson Soucy, who came in from Seattle, Ian Cole, Pius Suter, Teddy Bluger. They lost out on Ethan Bear. They got rid of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, who they bought out. Travis Dermott as well, and then just guys that can crack the roster. Arthur Silovs, Aturati, none of them are really going to make the team this year. But look, with Vancouver, I think everybody's talked about this for a long time. They can score. We know they can. Connor Garland, Brock Besser, Elias Pettersson, JT Miller, Kuzmenko. These guys are great players. Beauvillier is not a bad player to get. Probably Beauvillier on that top six. Their bottom six is really weak, probably weaker than Edmonton's. Not a big fan of Dakota Joshua. Not a big fan of Jackson Nico or Nils Aman. Teddy Bluger's okay. Their center depth is okay, but nothing wow about Vancouver at all. Defensively, listen, Quinn Hughes, Philip Roenick, that's a good top four to have. Tyler Myers is just not it. Carson Soucy's not bad. Ian Cole's okay. Noah Juulsen's not the best. And then in net, look, they've improved with Thatcher Demko and Casey DeSmith, but I don't have much hope in Vancouver. I don't like what they're doing down there. I think that they're ruining Pettersson and Hughes' opportunities at a cup. I know Demko wasn't the best last year. I think he'll probably bounce back this year, and they have a better backup in Casey DeSmith, so that's going to be their goaltending is going to be better. But I'm just not sure. I don't like a lot of their things. I'm not a big fan of their bottom six, and even their defense. I'm just not a huge fan of it. I think they're very weak, and it's going to be another rough year for them. For Vancouver, I actually have them sixth. I think they're gonna be the same position they were last year. It's going to be another up and down year for them. Just to be honest. So.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Their general managing moves haven't been great the past couple of years. I'm sure Vancouver fans are always scratching their heads wondering what's the direction of this team. I know I've mentioned this in previous videos, but I think it's at this point now entering the regular season, it's still applicable.
Yeah.
Obviously Kuzmenko is a move that worked for them. Yeah. Kuzmenko proved himself last year. This is a very good top six, top nine. I would say I agree with you on that. They have the center depth. They have the wingers who could score. Elias Pettersson is a top 10 center. I think that's being conservative in this league. Quinn Hughes is an outstanding defenseman. Their decor is just not good. I think a lot of Vancouver fans expected them to add a legit top four, and then you could, feel good about their decor and be like, they're making strides to make the playoffs this year. But they try to add in the aggregate by adding Ian Cole and Carson Soucy. That's just not going to work. They're good enough to be consistent NHLers, but they're just not gonna do it for you. And Hronek, Hronek was a good move. Tyler Myers, Noah Juulsen, there's nothing to be said there. It's honestly it's Quinn Hughes who's the only dynamic player on that decor. And I liked Thatcher Demko. I know he had a bad year last year. He didn't have much in front of him. I think he'll have a bounce back year this year. But is there more to be covered about this team? I don't think they're going to be back in the playoffs. Unfortunately, they need a change in management. That's what I think this team needs, and I have them also finishing sixth in this division.
Yeah, I don't. I to be honest, with Vancouver, I've kind of given up. I've liked them for a long time, but they haven't wowed me. And to be honest, I don't think it's going to continue. I think they're going to have another rough year this year. It's going to have to be a lot of changes need to be made in Vancouver. To be honest, moving on to the final team and the Cup winners, the Vegas Golden Knights, who did nothing in terms of additions this year. So they just simply didn't add anybody. They decided to keep their team
The
pretty
band
much
is back.
intact.
The band is back together. The
Yeah,
band is back together.
for the most part, they lost. They got rid of Laurent Brossoit. They traded away Riley Smith and Teddy Bluger. But honestly speaking, Vegas didn't really do much in this offseason. They kept the team intact. You know what? I don't think there was much they could have done, to be honest. Their team is really good. Like, their team is just really good. They showed it last year. They won the cup with this team. Every single one of these guys that's in this forward core was the cup winner last year. So I'm not going to criticize Vegas. They're going to have a good year. They're going to be number one. Same thing with defense. I mean, it's just look at it, like just look at it. It's very good. They won a cup with the decor, so I can't turn around and just criticize Vegas. They didn't add anybody. They lost and somebody that people that weren't even they were big parts, yes, but at the same time, like they weren't huge losses. They've had every guy that they've had on that they've, let's say, quote unquote, replaced them with, were all on the team to begin with anyways. In net, the only acquisition that's actually really important for them is that they get Logan Thompson back, which is nice. Zach Whiteclaw being injured sucks. But Logan Thompson and Ian Hill, I have nothing to say. Like, other than the fact that I think Vegas is going to finish first in the division, I have nothing to say. They're the reigning Cup champions. They're going to have a good year this year again. Bruce Cassidy is going to coach them really well. Jack Eichel and Mark Stone are healthy, which is nice. And it's going to be a great year for Vegas. I have nothing to say. They're good. They won the cup. They kept the band together. I don't think that they can be worse than what they were last year. So to be honest, I think the only thing they can do is not make the playoffs. Not make the playoffs. Not win the cup. But besides that, I think they're going to be the best team in this division. So that's my opinion on it. I don't know if you have anything
Yeah,
to say, Zach.
yeah. Well, there's not much to be said, but what I'll say is, this is not a team that's gonna have a playoff hangover. They have,
No.
with the core they have, Jack Eichel really coming into his own in with this organization. You got a healthy Mark Stone. You got Jonathan Marchessault, so Alex Pietrangelo. They they didn't draft these guys, and after 10 years or 5 years with the organization, the reward was winning the Stanley Cup, and then you could sit on your laurels for a little bit, like maybe like the LA Kings did after they won their cups. These guys are
Yeah.
highly motivated. Petrangelo handpicked this destination because the organizational message is they want to be perennial winners. All these guys are going to come. And Jack Eichel, for losing for so long, you think he needs a competitor? You think he's satisfied just winning one Stanley Cup? He's going for the other one. This team
No.
is going to be very good, very well coached in the regular season. You touched on their roster. I like. There's not much more to be said. This is a very good roster from top to bottom. They won't have Zach Whitecloud to start the year. Once he's
Yeah.
back, that rounds out that decor perfectly, and that's the decor they had last year, that they started the most last year, winning the Stanley Cup. Thompson had a great rookie season. He's gonna get better. I'm a big fan of his game. Aiden Hill is coming back. People are complaining about the figure, but he was so good in the playoffs. Regular season, forget about that. He was so good in the playoffs, and the term is 2 years, so it's not a bad contract for this team. This team is going to be very good, though. They could be on maybe they'll be on cruise control in October and November, and then whenever they decide to pick it up, they'll pick it up. This
Yeah.
is a team that's going to finish, in my opinion. I have them second. I like their goaltending better than LA's goaltending.
Yeah.
But I think LA has a lot. They have a more dynamic roster this year. That I think in the regular season, if you just consider regular season, obviously, are going to be slightly ahead of this team. But these are going to be two 100-point plus teams in the regular season.
I agree. Anyways, guys, we do thank you for watching this video. That concludes our series for this division predictions. We hope you guys enjoyed. Please let us know in the comments below if you agree with our predictions. And if you guys don't agree, obviously let us know in the comments. And get ready for the start of the NHL season. It is only 3 days away, actually. It will be starting on Tuesday. So we are very, very excited. We're actually recording this on a Saturday. So good luck, guys, and have a great rest of the day. Bye bye.